Welcome to the debate. Today we are diving into, well, what is by far the most expensive weapon system in history, the F-35 Lightning II. And this aircraft is so much more than just a piece of hardware. It is really the physical manifestation of a profound philosophical and technological bet on the future of air power. A bet that has cost, what, well over $1 trillion to develop.
And it's a bet that, from the perspective of many analysts, I think, has not yet fully paid off. Not when you consider the tremendous sacrifices that were made to achieve its promised capabilities. Exactly. So the central question we have to get into today is this. Has the F-35's absolute prioritization of stealth and integrated information dominance, has it fundamentally redefined aerial superiority? Has it made all those traditional performance metrics obsolete? Or, as the critics maintain, do its clear trade-offs in speed, maneuverability, and raw kinetic power represent critical functional vulnerabilities that really undermine its status?
I would argue for the latter. My position is that the F-35 suffers from severe, tangible functional deficiencies when you compare it to many of its global competitors. And its staggering cost, coupled with this inherent political reliance on American data control, it creates strategic limitations that are, frankly, unacceptable for any nation that buys it. And I stand firmly against that. The F-35 is a revolutionary platform. It's not designed to win the wars of the 1970s. It is designed to define the conflicts of this century. It's the brain and the eye of the modern military force, and its design choices are entirely justified by that mission.
Okay, let's examine that justification then. You frame it as a platform, not just a fighter.
Precisely. The F-35, it has to be understood as an airborne sensor hub, maybe the playmaker, the number 10, if you will, of the networked military force. It's not some lone samurai looking for a duel. Its core strength lies in its ability to completely evade detection and fuse complex multispectral data into actionable intelligence.
The emphasis on evasion is, it's undeniable.
And it is technologically brilliant. Its advanced stealth design is just meticulously engineered to minimize its radar cross-section, or RCS. This wasn't achieved by accident. It's a direct application of Soviet physicist Pyotr Ufansev's research on the diffraction of electromagnetic waves. This work informed the F-35 to finding features, the highly inclined dual-tail fins, and that shattered edge body design. So these features, combined with the radar-absorbent material, the RAM coating, create an RCS that's often compared to the size of a golf ball. And this evasion capability, it fundamentally shifts warfare into a new era of ninja combat, making the dogfights you value, well, utterly irrelevant.
I'll concede the golf ball RCS is an extraordinary technical achievement, but I keep asking myself, at what cost? You have prioritized invisibility above everything else, and the resulting compromises in intangible performance metrics are a deep and abiding concern for anyone analyzing true combat readiness.
Such as? Because I think we're arguing about what even constitutes a relevant metric today.
Well, relevance has to include resilience, especially when you're fielding a multi-million-dollar asset. Let's start with speed. Previous generations were built for high speed, right, to increase survivability and mission flexibility. The F-4 Phantom could hit Mach 2.2. The F-35 is significantly slower. It's restricted to about Mach 1.6. And sustaining supersonic flight is structurally damaging to its stealth coatings. So while information superiority is critical, speed gives you flexibility to prevent detection, to reposition quickly, or to escape an unexpected engagement. That flexibility is just gone.
That's an interesting point, but I would argue that speed it's a legacy concern. It matters if you are seen. If the F-35 systems are working correctly, the need for a high-speed escape is mitigated by the fact that the enemy doesn't even know you're there until the weapon is already on its way.
So you're betting the entire mission on one system? What happens when that system fails, or it's countered? Consider its maneuverability, a direct casualty of the need to fit all these complex systems into a very specific airframe. The F-35 has a remarkably high wing loading, sitting at around 500 kilograms per square meter.
And for the listener who isn't tracking those metrics closely, What does that number practically imply?
It means the plane has to generate an enormous amount of lift per area, which severely restricts its agility. Think of a heavy sports car trying to take a tight corner compared to, say, a lightweight formula racer. So when you compare that 500 kilograms per square meter to key global competitors, like the Russian Su-35 or the French Rafale, they operate closer to 300. If stealth fails, the F-35 is inherently and functionally disadvantaged in any close-quarters fight.
We are back to this hypothetical dogfight again. It's a necessary contingency. And beyond agility, look at the kinetic capability. To maintain its golf ball RCS, the F-35's forced to carry its weaponry internally. This limits its capacity to between 4 and 10 air-to-air missiles and a pretty modest 25mm cannon. Competitors, by contrast, can carry external loads, with Russian equivalents routinely holding 10 to 14 missiles and deploying a much larger 30mm cannon. The raw destructive power, the staying capability of the F-35 is simply inferior for the sake of invisibility. And frankly, I just can't reconcile the massive operational cost, the expense of acquisition and maintenance, with a platform that knowingly sacrifices kinetic performance and combat resilience.
I appreciate the detailed metrics, I do, but I think we need to challenge the very premise that those metrics hold any value in the current combat environment. You cite the potential for a close-in dogfight, but history has already discredited that model.
But we have powerful historical evidence that maneuverability remains crucial. I mean, you can look at the Mansoura air battle in 1973, where older, less technologically advanced MiG-21s defeated superior F-4 Phantoms, and that was primarily through superior pilot skill and maneuverability. That demonstrates that if an engagement does occur, the functional inferiority of the F-35 remains a critical liability.
The problem with that historical analogy, though, is that the 1973 October War didn't just showcase pilot skill. It marked a major inflection point where the threat itself shifted. That was the moment ground-to-air missiles, SAMs, began to dominate the airspace, quickly neutralizing expensive traditional fighters. The F-35 is designed precisely to defeat the modern networked radar and SAM environment by being invisible. The Mansoura analogy is, well, it's decades outdated because the F-35's mission is to negate that initial threat, not dance around it.
So the shift is absolute then? The dogfight is dead?
Absolutely. We have moved entirely from a samurai era where combatants met face-to-face to a gamer environment where the successful pilot is the one who executes the mission entirely undetected. I mean, why prioritize speed when you're already behind enemy lines? The successful, albeit subsonic, F-117 Nighthawk in the Gulf War, it demonstrated that principle decades ago. Stealth made its speed irrelevant. The F-35 takes that principle and just enhances it geometrically through its networked sensors. Its ability to survive allows it to conduct precision strikes that older, faster platforms could never, ever risk.
Okay, I will concede the efficacy of stealth against the most sophisticated modern SAM arrays. However, let's pivot back to your concept of the F-35 as an eye and a brain. Its true defining characteristic is the integration of its software. And this deep reliance on proprietary software, what we might call the American Kentucky recipe of data analysis, it introduces a severe strategic problem for every single nation that buys it.
But that software is what guarantees the strategic advantage. The integration of the APG-81 AESA radar and the 6 DAS infrared sensors, it ensures all that data is securely fused and instantly shared across the network. That data stream, fed directly to the pilot's helmet-mounted display, creates the God's eye view you hear about. It allows the pilot to identify and strike targets they can't physically see. That capability is the non-negotiable strategic asset that, say, the F-22 lacked.
That's a compelling technological argument, sure, but have you fully considered the strategic subservience this dependence creates? By Kentucky recipe, we mean the proprietary algorithms, the source code, the deeply protected intellectual property that dictates how that sensor data is fused, analyzed, and shared. When allied nations purchase the F-35, they typically do not receive the full capability version. They get what's often referred to as a high copy.
That is a reality of managing highly sensitive military alliances, not a flaw in the plane itself.
Oh, it is absolutely a flaw in the plane's strategic utility for Allied buyers. By controlling the source code and the updates, the U.S. reserves the full strategic advantage for itself, ensuring significant control over its allies' strategic timeline and combat readiness. They can turn the eye on or off or limit what the brain can perceive, all based on U.S. geopolitical priorities.
But this is an investment in interoperability, isn't it? Ensuring that NATO forces, for instance, can work as one seamlessly integrated unit.
Interoperability that comes at the cost of sovereignty. And we see this dynamic perfectly encapsulated by the exception, Israel. They were granted the unique, explicitly negotiated right to integrate their own domestically developed software and components into the F-35I. This exception, this willingness to alter the core recipe for one ally, just highlights the explicit strategic control the U.S. maintains over every other nation's air power. The hardware is magnificent, but it's functionally neutered without the software, and the software is entirely controlled by the seller. The plane represents strategic dependence, not strategic independence.
That touches on a broader and perhaps more unsettling conceptual point about the nature of air warfare that the F-35 facilitates. If we move from the political to the conceptual, we have to address the psychological distance that's inherent in this new form of networked invisible combat.
I agree. Let's address the scale and the detachment this technology enables. Historically, theories like Giulio Douhet's focused on achieving command of the air, not just to defeat military installations, but to maximize psychological destruction against the adversary society as a whole.
A grim but, yes, an enduring concept in strategic air doctrine.
The F-35 facilitates the execution of that grim doctrine with maximum detachment. The network systems, the virtual reality provided by the helmet-mounted display, it effectively turns combat into a detached game for the pilot, who's operating, 10 kilometers above the target. We hear descriptions of pilots returning relaxed and even happy because they are not seeing the consequences in real time. They only see glowing points on a VR screen being efficiently eliminated. This technological distance maximizes the ability to inflict destruction with minimal psychological cost to the combatant.
I find that reasoning a little insufficient because the technology itself is simply the most advanced means to execute a strategic doctrine that has existed for a century. The F-35 is the logical result of continuous technologically intensive evolution driven by military necessity. Look at history. The B-29 carrying the atomic bomb required massive technological investment purely to deliver a weapon. The F-35 is just the latest, most efficient vehicle for delivering ordnance and intelligence. The problem is not the F-35's design, it is the doctrine it serves.
But the efficiency changes the scale, and the detachment changes the willingness to employ that scale. The F-35 is a paradigm shift because it makes mass destruction highly survivable and conceptually antiseptic for the operator. If we look at the application of this doctrine, the scale is staggering. Compare the estimated 4,000 tons of explosives dropped on Dresden in World War II, an act often cited as the epitome of this kind of warfare. That figure just pales in comparison to the estimated 75,000 tons dropped recently on Gaza.
The F-35, however, is designed to increase precision, not merely tonnage. It replaces the old blunt instrument of carpet bombing with highly accurate data-guided strikes.
And yet, it maximizes the efficacy of the underlying terrible doctrine by ensuring the weapon can be delivered undetected and that the pilot is never in jeopardy. The tool enables the scale of destruction, and the ethical distance allows for it to be viewed as a technical problem rather than a moral one. This has to be factored into its true valuation.
The tool is designed for survival in a complex, inexpensive SAM environment. That is its purpose, preventing the loss of the pilot and the multi-billion-dollar asset. That is the foundational necessity that drove the design.
And it is a necessity that has produced a platform with severe kinetic limitations and unsettling strategic dependence for its buyers.
I think we have clearly explored the critical tension between two philosophies of air power. The F-35 is fundamentally designed for this century, where conflict is determined by information dominance and evasion, not medieval samurai duels.
its stealth, its software, and its ability to act as the sensory nexus for the entire force. They fundamentally justify its cost and design choices, rendering platforms focused solely on outdated metrics like speed and payload obsolete. The F-35 kills the enemy fighter before the enemy pilot even knows they are being engaged.
I will grant that the F-35 is a remarkable technological achievement, one that successfully prioritizes technological superiority over raw kinetic performance. However, this achievement embodies an unsettling shift in the nature of conflict, prioritizing remote, detached destruction, gamer warfare, over combat resilience. Its technical shortcomings in speed, agility, and especially its high wing loading are critical vulnerabilities should its stealth fail. And ultimately, I cannot agree that its enormous cost and the explicit political control attached to its deployment are justified by a platform that sacrifices necessary combat resilience for invisibility, and in doing so puts Allied autonomy at risk.
We have analyzed the core material, charting the massive investment made in redefining what aerial superiority truly means.
And this tension forces us to confront a profound consequence. The evolution of flight, originally conceived for freedom, has accelerated most rapidly for the purpose of efficient, detached mass destruction, constantly increasing the distance between the combatant and the consequences of their actions.
An important reflection as we continue to analyze this material. Thank you for joining us on the debate.